Hey y'all, we are live once again. It is the No Name Cinema Society. It's our classic movie discussion for the evening. And we're going to talk about The Usual Suspects. It's our 32nd classic movie discussion. And if you're watching on YouTube, it's episode 32.3. Every time we do a new episode and the number goes up, I get more and more surprised that we're still around. And you can see the movie behind us. Behind me is The Usual Suspects. There you can see next to Bogey there. So it's time for us to talk about that film from 1995. So before we do, let me talk about our our schedule for the evening so far. And this is what's happened. About an hour ago, we talked about Florence Foster Jenkins, and it was a very interesting discussion. So interesting that we were a little late to talk about a separation at 8:30. But that was also a pretty interesting discussion. And now it's 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific, and we're going to talk about The Usual Suspects. And don't forget to tune in for our Sound Off, our freeform section of the evening, in which we talk about all sorts of fun stuff. Davey's going to have a diatribe. He's going to dig in about some of the movies he's seen lately, or TV shows, or whatever he does with his spare time. And also, what else? Oh, I have a top 5. I have a top 5 Kevin Spacey movies. Since we're talking about The Usual Suspects, it seems only appropriate to dig into Kevin Spacey's career, and that's happening later this evening. Let me introduce my my cohorts for episode 32.3. Same ones as always. Who gets to go first? Oh, it's our own Fenster, who sometimes he speaks and we don't understand what he's talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, Drunk Davey. Davey Joseph, how are you, Davey?
I can't believe that was me you were talking about.
Well, I mean, like, if you're a fencer, then our own Kaiser Soze is J Money.
Wow, that is an honor. And let me tell you, I have actually been compared to Kaiser Soze before.
Sure, yeah.
I don't even think I want to know.
Back when I had long hair,
so here's the,
it was a nickname.
What's that?
Back when I had long hair, it was the nickname.
Oh, I see. Anyway, our trivia for the evening is both on Facebook and in the broadcast last time. I teased it as being a 90s film that got its title from a famous line of movie dialogue, which of course is, and you guys know the answer to this one. What movie is it?
The Parent Trap?
Parent Trap is wrong. Davey, come on, help us out here.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Is it the Flintstones? The John Goodman remake?
What movie? Where did this movie get its title?
The Usual Suspects?
Yeah.
I don't know.
J Money. Help him out, J Money.
Did you not see the trivia, Davey Joe?
We do trivia?
Casablanca. The movie gets its title from the famous line, "Round up the usual suspects."
Oh yeah, you know I've seen it like 100 times too. Yeah, that's right. Good point.
That's right. Yeah, which may or may not be a classic movie discussion in 2017. I'm not saying. I'm saying is all I'm saying.
Right.
So that is the trivia, and sorry to the audience if that took as long as it did. I didn't think that it would. Parent Trap was a good guess, though, J Money.
Either that or Cannonball Run. Those are my 2 best options for this.
Both of which are wrong, but I mean, like, I appreciate the effort, as it's more than I can say for what Davey Joe gave me. You guys ready for a crappy summary?
Lay it on us.
Yeah. Okay. So 5 low-level criminals meet in a police lineup for a hijacking that they didn't seem to commit. While locked up, they come up with a plan for a heist that sets them on a convoluted collision course with the mysterious crime boss known as J Money. I mean, Kaiser Soze.
I wish.
So, what's that?
I wish. Man.
Everyone knows deep down you're a crime boss. And J Money, since you are the boss, you get to do your opening thoughts first. Although I can't see. There you are.
Yep. Hello.
Hey, man.
It's a good movie. It's a very satisfying movie. It lives up to being satisfying even 20 years later. So, thumbs up.
Davy Joe?
Yeah, I agree. I had a good time watching this again. It had been a long time, so it was fun.
And both of you had seen this before, I presume.
Yeah.
For those of you, J Money's nodding. He doesn't always know when he's on camera, so I have to like do a play-by-play. Anyway, so I screened it twice. Most recently in December of 2015, and also once in June of 2012. So I've had 2 classic movie screenings with this film, both in New York, with different audience members. And both times I would say the audience was, like they enjoyed it, but I would also say that it was admired, but it was not a movie that they were passionate about. Now, granted, it was December, so it's now 9 months ago since I've last seen it, and we're getting so far behind in the classics that I'm remembering the details less and less. Obviously, it's a good film, but I've never personally been a big fan, and this is where it's going to get controversial. And Davy Joe, are you able to mute yourself or something, because I'm getting feedback? I assume it's you, or I don't know if you put headphones in or whatever it is. So yeah, I mean, I have some issues with this movie. I mean, it's a clever script, but ultimately overrated. I think it was buzzworthy in 1995 due to its twists and surprises, similar to how The Sixth Sense was in 1999, a movie that was interesting at the time and buzzworthy at the time, but doesn't hold up as much. I don't think this film holds up super well. Again, I'm not going to say it's a bad film. I don't want to make that statement, and I don't believe that. But I don't think it's the masterpiece that it's made out to be, or that it was discussed being in 1995. And to some people since, like some people really think that it's the bee's knees, and I'm not sure it's there. So I think I like this film far less than you do, and I like it. I just don't love it, and that was the case at the screenings as well. Everyone spoke positively, but not the passionate feeling that they've had towards some of the other films that we've watched, like Lion in Winter or something like that. So let's start with the positives and talk about what I think is the best thing about it, and that's the screenplay. It's intelligent and detailed, and it's clever, but is it too clever? I guess we'll unpack that in a second. What do you guys think about the screenplay?
I mean, I agree with all of that. I think that it's pretty intricate, and it's fun, but it's also maybe a little fatiguing. You're definitely kind of hanging on to everything, and it maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a bit much after a while.
I mean, like, the complex plotting, is it's intricate and also to some degree manipulative. Like, there's a contrivance involved there that is sort of, cheating to some degree, because they withhold just the right amount of information, which doesn't feel organic or natural or anything like that. So it doesn't resonate in that way for me. And the structure is also well, it's interesting. What do you guys? How do you feel about the structure, specifically the way that the story unfolds, being from Verbal Kint's point of view through this thing, and which leads to the ultimate twist? How do you guys feel about that?
I mean, me personally, that actually kind of makes the movie for me. The fact that it's being sort of retold through this one character's point of view, which I don't want to give anything away, I guess, but by the end could be complete. I
mean, the film's 20 years old. I think. I mean, can we vote on this? I think with the classics we can be a little more liberal. Davy Joe, what do you think?
I mean, everyone knows the ending of this.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I would agree. I think at this point the ending has been parodied and picked up in pop culture so many times that I think that you kind of have to at least understand where the ending is probably going, even if you haven't seen the movie. And I think that the fact that it has been actually picked up in that way is a testament to the power of this movie in some ways. I don't think it's a great movie either, but I think that I like it more than JB does. And I would say that
Yeah, well, again, I don't want to say it's a bad movie. I mean, it's impressive. There's many impressive things about it. Like, you know, the dialogue is really strong. I mean, even that one line that I think is its most famous line, the most famous trick the devil ever pulled is convincing the world he didn't exist. Terrific, terrific bit of dialogue.
But getting back to your question about structure, I mean, to me, the way that it was set up actually puts an extra layer of interest on the movie when you're done watching it, because then it sort of like, you know, makes you question whether or not anything actually happened that you just saw. To me, that's one of the extra things that I appreciate about it.
It's funny, I used that same argument for Total Recall and was rebuffed.
Yeah, I can see that.
But regardless, but then that's a fair point. Like, I don't disagree. It's like, okay, what's real, what's not real, and that's interesting, and that's why the screenplay itself, you know, has a lot of qualities. Is it, you know, but sometimes it almost feels too clever for its own good. Is that a statement that you guys can understand or get behind, or am I being overly critical?
Well, I don't know if it's overly critical, but it does seem like it's definitely about hindsight. I mean, I think it's sort of like, you know, now 20 years later we can look at this and be like, yeah, it was a little clever for its own good because we all know all the beats of this movie. We all know the twist. We all know how it plays out, and I think, you know, from that point of view, it might be easier to say that. You know, certainly at the time, like you were saying in '95, I think people were losing their minds over this movie in a way, which is kind of funny in hindsight. But you know, it was also a fun movie. I think of it as just a simple, sort of, you know, enjoyable, you know, caper. And you know, whether or not it was too clever, it doesn't necessarily bother me that it was too clever, I guess. You know, from that point of view.
Well, I mean, like I think I mean, like when we do the Kevin Spacey top 5, I'll point out a counterpoint is that a movie that's clever and complex while still having three-dimensional characters, which I'm not sure this movie does. And that's what sinks it a lot for me, is I feel like these are just sort of caricatures of movie thugs from movie history, and I appreciate its knowledge and understanding of film noir and movie history and high school in particular. Like, it seems to borrow a lot from those genres, but at the same time, it doesn't necessarily seem to have anything, you know, original on its own merit.
Right. No, I see where you're going with that, and I think I know what movie you're probably going to be talking about in your top 5 that might be relative to what you're saying here. So, yeah, I you know, this is again, I'll go back and say this is a very simple movie. It's a simple movie in the sense that the characters themselves are all kind of filling up certain archetypes within thuggish guys, like you're saying. They're all certain sort of like, you know, criminal types in general. And you're just sort of like watching things get wound up and play out like clockwork, and I think that can be enjoyable in and of itself. But it's not, you know, there's not too much going on there necessarily. It's just that it's fun to sort of watch the spectacle of it happen.
Yeah, I mean, this movie definitely suffers from a lack of depth. I mean, like, you say it's fun and whatever, but there's not much to it. Like, ultimately, like, I feel like and in that sense, it's a disappointment. I mean, I grant you, I saw it late in the process. I saw it on home video, you know, years after it was released. I'd say 3 or 4 years after it was released, and you know, like, the expectations were so high, but I mean, like, I felt like it could have been better. Like, I feel like all these things were easy fixes. Like, for example, the love story for Keaton, and I couldn't find one single photo online of this woman. that's his motivation throughout the entire movie. I scoured the internet to see if I could find a photo to use to make this point, and I couldn't find a single one of this woman. That's how insignificant she is. Right. In this movie, and she shouldn't be. It's super important to his entire motivation.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's part of the issue with having an ensemble cast like this, right? They each had to have their own piece of the pie, and maybe nobody could really get enough time spent on them to actually develop a real serious narrative for any of them to follow through on.
Maybe, but I mean, certainly at the time, certainly not now, but at the time, Gabriel Byrne was the biggest star of them all, and you know, he was the one that could have demanded more screen time, and he was the protagonist, at least was meant to be the red herring protagonist, you could argue. So I think I don't think that's a good excuse, I guess, is my point. I'm not saying you're trying to make excuses for them, but I feel like that is a major flaw that could have been addressed. It's an easy fix to give them a little more time to establish that relationship, so that you can understand his motives instead of just saying, oh, he loves her, cool, he'll do anything. You know, like that's sort of how they approached it. Davey, do you have anything on this? You're smiling wickedly.
No, I tend to agree with what you're saying. I think that it's odd how we can call it sort of a complex story, but also simple in some ways. And I think that the problem with this movie is ultimately what it boils down to is the ending seems to be I don't know. The ending always kind of bothered me that he was somehow able to put together this story based on just all the few things that he saw in the room.
It's really contrived, right? Like ultimately,
Yeah.
like there's a cleverness to it, but it's really contrived.
And it's all perfect. Like it's all perfect.
Too
like,
perfect.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's fun to watch. It's a fun movie, but it's not. It's never going to be one of my favorites.
I was expecting a lot more heat for this. I was expecting a lot of, like, JB, what are you thinking? You're the biggest idiot in the face of the planet. That was what I expected Davey's response would be. I thought he was going to call me names, but instead,
come to that later, but not right now. No.
What's that?
So it could come to that later, but not right now. No.
That's off camera. Let's talk a little bit about the direction. Brian, this film that launched Bryan Singer's career, it's more or less. It was his second feature behind a film called Public Access, which sort of got him known in the indie circles, and this was the next film that came about and launched him to a new stratosphere, and now he's a major Hollywood director. So let's talk about his direction to some degree, and I certainly have a list of things, but what are some of the things that you guys noticed, like in terms of how he approached the material?
Man, I don't know. It's funny because I guess I feel like this is such a serviceable sort of like cut and dry movie for me. I've never really thought about his role as a director in it. I mean, you probably have a lot more insight about this than I do.
David, do you have anything before I give my insight?
No, nothing really jumps out at me.
I think that says a lot to some degree about the direction, but I mean, like, some good things that I think that he accomplished was there's a consistency of vision there. I mean, the tone and what they set out to approach, like, it is very consistent in how he approaches the material and the interplay between the actors. Like that, like it all feels like part of the same world that he's essentially creating. So that's a good thing. I think not to being very careful not to tip his hand. I think in between him and the screenwriter and the editor, I think they did a really nice job of careful. I mean, like, it's manipulative, but it seems like that was part of the plan. So at least he achieved that goal, regardless of how I feel about the contrivance of it. So sure. I mean, that shows skill to some degree. Also, the neo-noir look of it, I think was a good quality. Without being, going full-on black and white, they sort of, desaturated the colors to some degree, and the look seems to be consistent with the vision. The other thing that we talk about sometimes, I think we talked about it in The Lion in Winter, that did impress me in this movie, especially J Money talked about it being an ensemble movie, and with this many actors in the similar scenes, this thing comes up a lot, and that's blocking for the camera. I think it does a really nice job of staging the actors within these scenes, and all of them, like, this is a scene that stands out, but also the scene in the jail cell where they all sort of meet for the first time, or at least start talking to each other anyway. I mean, I think that those are good examples of how to appropriately, like, block lots of people, and lots of that all need their shared screen time. You know what I mean? Like, there's a balance there that he achieves, and this meeting out in the West Coast is another good example of some decent blocking for the camera. So those are the things. Those are the good things that I think he did. How do you, now that I've sort of opened that can of worms, how do you guys feel about those things?
Yeah, I think you made a lot of good points there. I mean, I think that, especially just the last point you're talking about with blocking, there were a lot of complicated scenes from that point of view that I think worked out well. And I guess I don't really feel like necessarily any one actor fell by the wayside so much. I guess I feel like everybody had some sort of fair shot. there are certainly like lesser actors in this movie to begin with, and it's okay that we're not necessarily seeing a lot of screen time for them. But in general, it feels like it held together in terms of how much the cast interacted. I think it's an interesting point about the idea of how it looked, especially in terms of it being kind of neo-noir. There's another great sort of neo-noirish movie that came out around this time. At least in my opinion, it's great. Michael Mann's Heat, which I think is a good almost comparison in a certain way from that look. And in that sense, this movie
I think Heat looks very different. I mean, I think Heat, like, it has a slicker look, which Michael Mann is known for. It like a lot of it's a little more polished in that regard.
Yeah, it's more sophisticated, and I think that I don't think necessarily this movie looks that good one way or the other. I think it's okay, but I also
I think it looks the way it ought to. Like I feel like the look fits the narrative and the style, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but I also feel like it fits it in a relatively generic way. I guess I feel like it's very much on the nose for what it could be, as opposed to having.
I don't disagree with that. I don't know what other choices would have been made.
Sure.
I don't know if I would have done it differently in that regard, because it feels appropriate. So sometimes on the nose it just has to be like, and I don't know, it's like a delicate balance because it has to be right. So especially if it's your first or second film.
Yeah.
You want to, in theory, make those safer choices, at least in terms of look. Davy Joe, what do you think about some of the things that we're talking about?
I think I'll just speak to kind of what you were talking about with the look of the movie. It definitely does have a grit to it, and it definitely has it has a way of creating a feel that is consistent and kind of unique to the movie. I mean, I definitely think this movie has its own fingerprint. It feels pretty much unto its own, even though it is, I guess, in some ways a derivative of the old noirs. It has a kind of a 90s look to it also. So that is kind of
90s indie look.
Yeah, and it's I can't compare it to anything, so that's kind of neat. I mean,
well, I mean, you mean in terms of look, I presume.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing we always talk about in terms of direction is performances, and it's some people forget this, but Bryan Singer directed an Oscar-winning performance, and it's from this movie, and you wouldn't think 20 years later that Bryan Singer had directed an Oscar-winning performance, but there it is, given his track record since then. I mean, I'm joking, but I'm not joking. You were laughing a little bit, J Money, and I didn't get it on camera. But but yeah, Kevin Spacey won the Oscar, and I think and we're going to talk about Kevin Spacey's performances in theory in the next segment in the sound off. I don't think it's a bad performance. I just wonder if the win was more for another movie, which we'll talk about as well, and B, the cleverness of the character and the twist of the ending. Because, I mean, there were some performances that year. I think about Ed Harris in Apollo 13 is the one that jumps immediately in mind. The one that really, I think, should have won is a very unheralded performance from Tim Roth in a movie called Rob Roy. It's not as well remembered a movie, but the performance is astounding. Has anybody seen Rob Roy?
Yeah, I've seen it. I think I've actually seen it twice.
Davy Joe's writing it down for our roll call later this evening. So performance-wise, where are we on Bryan Singer's direction of actors in this movie? Obviously, one of them won an Oscar, but A, was that Oscar deserved, and B, how was everybody else in the ensemble?
I guess I feel like I think that people were so charmed with the character, and that probably explains a lot of the win for Kevin Spacey in that situation. And this is nothing against Kevin Spacey, because I think that he's done plenty of great work in general. But I don't think that this role itself was necessarily the thing that should have earned him a statue. I will say that there were some other performances in it that I really enjoy. I really enjoy Benicio del Toro in this movie, and I think this might have been a breakout role for him, or maybe.
Oh, definitely.
Definitely okay. I definitely don't remember ever noticing him ever before this, and I remember people talking about his role in this movie. So I feel like this was a thing that sort of stuck out. I really like the way that he sort of stumbles his way through it. I really like the fact that he kind of mumbles and sort of what changes, makes it more difficult and challenging for people. I actually really like Gabriel Byrne in this movie as well. I mean, we weren't exactly giving him props earlier in the conversation, but I think that he's still a striking character one way or the other. What are the Baldwins? Hey, fantastic, right? No, I don't know.
I think there's only one Baldwin in the movie, but
is there? Who can tell? Who can tell?
Billy.
What?
It's Billy Baldwin, right?
Billy Baldwin.
Steven.
Yeah. Steven Baldwin.
Right. One of them. He was good.
Davy Joe, where are you on these performances before I opine?
Well, look, I think I'm gonna have to come to Kevin Spacey's defense a little bit. I think that it's a pretty great performance. I think that the way he kind of balances the physical disability with sort of a kind of swarmy, maybe not the smartest.
I think you mean smarmy.
Yeah, sure. As
opposed to swarmy like bees.
Yes. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, he was kind of
we do real well with the vocabulary on this.
It's true. It's
infamous, famous. Anyway, so the sort of naive character that he's portraying. That is it's a facade, and then ultimately he ends up being the mastermind, and it's just kind of the way he balances all that. I think is actually pretty remarkable. As far as the rest of the performances, I think that let's not forget Pollock and how good he is in this film. He's always good, but I mean I think this is, if I remember, this is the first role that I remember seeing him in, and I
Not a Few Good Men.
I don't know. I don't remember which one of those I saw first, honestly. I saw them both on.
A Few Good Men was 3 years earlier.
I saw them both on VHS, so who the heck knows which one I saw first. I bet your mom knows.
Whoa.
Wow. That's
Smackdown.
Shots fired, JB. Anywho, yeah, performances are good.
Well, I mean, I'm going to disagree. I'm going to disagree mostly with that. I mean, I think the actors are all good. I just don't think they're given a lot to work with, except for Kevin Spacey. I think the role is good, and he does fine with it. But I mean, as we've discussed many times, when an actor brings unique choices to brings more than to what's on the page, like say Tim Roth in Rob Roy, and another nominee in 1995 is Brad Pitt in 12 Monkeys. I think a lot of these performances are, to me, stand out, for these extra things that these actors are bringing to the role. And Kevin Spacey played what was on the page. It was an interesting role. It's an interesting character, and I'm not going to say that's a bad performance. I don't think any of them are bad performances. I think they're all mediocre roles, and they play them as fine, except for Del Toro. I'll give you Del Toro made the unique choice of mumbling, which was interesting. I like Kevin Pollak too, but I do think Baldwin is a weak link, and I think the screenplay, it was more interested in plot than character. I think that's fair to say. Does anybody disagree with that?
No, I don't disagree with that.
No.
Cool. We're ahead of schedule, it seems. You guys want to move on to the showdown?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Unless, Davey, do you have more you want to add?
No, I'm good.
I think we fairly covered Usual Suspects. Yeah.
Let me put in one more thing for Kobayashi. I love that actor.
Oh sure,
he shows up and I just love him. Mostly for his cheekbones. I love his cheekbones. He's an amazing cheekbone actor.
Yes. That's all you had to say. That I thought there would be more.
I like the guy.
Is that it?
I like his understated performance in this movie. I like the fact that he's kind of a red herring in terms of a villain. I like the fact that he is seething in a way and intimidating, but very refined. I mean, to your point, it's a small role. It's not like he has a lot to work with. I don't really know if he made a lot of artisans with it. I just think he's like perfectly cast for it. So shout out to that guy.
Right, and well, that does take us to the end of our time. So
You're welcome.
We're on schedule, sort of, for now. So let us move on to the Classic Movie Showdown, or as it says here, the Classic Feature Showdown, which I wasn't anticipating that it would say that, but there it is. So I hope you guys have seen this before. If you have not, then we've got some things to show you. It's essentially like a matchup between movies that we have these brackets, like the NCAA tournament. And these movies go head-to-head with one another. And to explain how that all works to you is my buddy over here, David Joseph. Are you ready for your big moment of every week?
You bet. Let's do it.
All right, it's time for Davey. Davey explains it all to you. Here are the rules of the Classic Movie Showdown.
All right, so the seating criteria varies from bracket to bracket. Films are screened at JV-hosted screenings, and they need to be 15 years or older. Voters are eligible if they see both films within a 12-month period. Voters must see both films in JV's presence. JV is ineligible to vote. Unless the vote counts, he can break ties.
So, J Money, if you were seeing this for the first time, would you get a full grasp of it from his explanation just now?
Yeah, if I was actually listening to him, I probably would have really understood exactly what was going on.
Okay, so those are the rules, and it's time for me to introduce the bracket to you. This is the IMDb bracket. So we took the top 64 films on IMDb's top 250 as of 2012 or something, because modern films are mixed in there, like films this year are mixed in there. We took the top 64, excluding films of that particular year, whatever year it was that we did it, and created a top 64, created brackets from it, and here is what the matchup becomes. Usual Suspects versus Terminator 2, only 4 years earlier. So let's see what happens next. You guys get to vote. Let me pull up a T2 photo. I screened Terminator 2. I think in I want to say it was November or so of 2015. So that was that screening, and so the same people got to see it. They got to see the two films a month apart and got to compare and contrast. Davey, you get to vote first.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll go with Terminator 2, I guess.
You feel this?
Neither of these films are. I mean, they're both fun. They're both films I like, but I don't know. I don't. They're not in my revered pantheon of films by any stretch.
Would a Separation be in your premier pantheon of films by any stretch?
Oh, phone. No. I don't know. I think that it's better than both of these. Put it that way.
Okay. Some lack of love for both films, but Terminator 2. What puts Terminator 2 over the top?
Terminator 2. Just some action that I think stands out and kind of stands the test of time, and it's it's some like this picture that you have on the screen right now. Sort of some imagery that I think is sort of iconic. I think that there's some of that same stuff with the Usual Suspects, but I don't know. The Terminator 2 stuff sticks with me more, so I'll go with that.
Okay, sounds good. Let's see. I guess that makes you next, J Money.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just because I'm not like 10 years old anymore, but I think Terminator 2 is kind of a giant pile of crap. So I'm going to go with Usual Suspects on this one.
Interesting. So, what makes Terminator 2 a giant pile of crap?
Well, let me back up and say that I'm a huge fan of Terminator 1, the first Terminator, and perhaps, from that perspective, I'm not a fan of what Terminator 2 was. Terminator 2 to me was just kind of a ridiculous, celebrity cash grab of a movie. I mean, I think it's really bogged down by the idea of a child John Connor, the child star Eddie, what is his name? Eddie Long? Not Eddie Long. Eddie Furlong.
Furlong.
I mean, he's terrible in it, for one thing, so that's kind of a huge weight on this movie. I think it ended up being kind of, just a mediocre action film in the end. They spent a lot of money on it.
Did either of you rewatch Terminator 2 for tonight?
I've seen it in the last 5 years, so I'm not going to include it here.
No, I didn't rewatch it.
Lazy bastard.
They spent so much. They made such a big deal, and they spent so much money on one special effect, which is not at all impressive anymore. And I just don't think it holds up. I just don't think it's a movie that kind of makes it past the time frame that it was in, which I would say that's definitely an issue with a lot of Cameron's films for me. So that's right on par with how I think of him in general. But
yeah, I'm with Davey. I mean, I like Terminator. I actually like Terminator 2 a lot, and I'm mediocre on The Usual Suspects. So I actually prefer Terminator 2 to Terminator 1.
Oh my God, you are crazy.
So I knew I was going to get insulted at some point. I just misinterpreted.
Is that insulting?
That's correct in every way. Terminator 1 is mediocre. It's no big deal.
Terminator 1 is amazing. How can you even say that? That's crazy.
Here it is. This is me saying it. Terminator 1, mediocre at best.
Oh my God. Go back and watch it, man. You are missing out if you think that's true.
I love that they're fighting, and I can sit here and watch. That's the best. So yeah, I mean, I for one, and the Terminator 2 screening there was a lot more effusive reaction to it. Like the people that watched it were much more effusive about it. So when there was some mixed reactions to The Usual Suspects, I kind of thought that was leading to a Terminator 2 victory, but alas, The Usual Suspects did win. And I would make the point that I did get the sense that the people that voted for The Usual Suspects did so begrudgingly. It almost like I'm being serious now. Like one person even made the point that they felt like it was the more important film, so it felt like they had to vote for it. You know what I mean? Whereas Terminator 2 has a sort of like, it's like it's an action movie, so it's not as a big of a deal. Like that. So that was their rationale. And like that was the mood in the room, but I mean, like I feel like, like if I'd given them a week to think about it, I think they might have come back with Terminator 2. It's hard to say for sure, but that's my impression. Even in remembering the vote, I remember such positivity towards Terminator 2 that I thought Terminator 2 had won, and then I went back and checked before I emailed Jay Money for the brackets. I'm like, oh, I guess The Suspect did win, and I went back and saw my notes, and I'm like, oh, that won, almost in spite of itself. So Usual Suspects moves on in the IMDb bracket. So how do you guys feel about all that I just said there? What are your reactions?
Well, David Joe is in tears, I'm sure.
David Joe.
I understand their thinking that maybe they felt compelled to vote Usual Suspects, but their heart really wasn't in it. I like both of the movies. I don't love either one of them. They're both uniformly better than the first Terminator. That's what I'll.
I don't know if we're friends anymore.
That's what I'll give them.
That might have been the end of it for us.
He's spent too much time in New York now. He's worn down his welcome. All right, guys. Anything else on this? We might end this one early. It's only 42 minutes.
I'm good.
Do you have more you want to say?
I guess not. I mean, ultimately, I think that all of us are relatively lukewarm about these movies. I mean, even you guys, you like Terminator 2 more than I do, obviously, but you still don't think it's like the best movie ever made, right?
No,
I don't think that, but I think it is. I think it's a very strong movie and extremely well directed, and a very good action movie. A very good action movie.
When did you see it last?
And it would certainly score well in that regard. What's that?
When did you see it last?
At the screening in November.
When did you see it first?
Remember? 1992, like as soon as it came out on video.
Oh, on video, yeah. It's funny because I was thinking about this earlier today. Like that was a movie that I was super excited to see when it was around in '92. And if you remember, it was a really big deal because I think at the time it was the most expensive movie ever made.
It was the highest grossing movie of the year. It was not the most expensive movie ever made, but it was up there. I mean, like, it depends on how you judge inflation and all that other stuff. But
okay. I mean, I remember all these.
Arnold Schwarzenegger's heyday was the highest ever.
Yeah, and that's what it was, because I remember all these ridiculous stories about the cost of Schwarzenegger being involved and all these special things he had that he requested from the movie itself. There was so much buzz around this movie, and I remember being a cultural event in a way, but I also was like, I don't know, 11-ish or 12-ish at the time, and it means something different to you at that age. It's like this is a thing that you're sharing in part with because it's a bigger deal, I think, to watch an action movie at that age. And I loved it when I was a kid, but it just didn't hold up for me, unfortunately. It just didn't stand the test of time for me. So
I was surprised. See, I had the opposite reaction. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed watching it again.
Yeah.
There's some really great sequences. The chase sequence that Davy Joe talked about earlier on the motorcycle, and also their escape from the mental institution is really terrific.
For me, I guess I always thought there was going to be more. It just didn't. It felt a little hollow to me, but.
I also really liked Joe Morton's performance.
What's that?
I also really like Joe Morton's performance. If you remember Joe Morton, I forget his character name.
Joe Morton's the doctor.
He's the scientist that.
Yeah, the doctor.
Sacrifices himself.
Spitzer, yeah. I mean, I love the idea of the story, and I love the fact that they brought him through, through the movies. Even in Terminator 3, he shows up in that movie, so it's good that this is keeping me employed.
I did give up at the franchise. I did watch the one that McGee directed, the Christian Bale one, but after that, I'm sort of done.
That was terrible, right? I didn't.
That was the worst. That was the worst.
Davy Joe and I actually saw it in the theater.
That means Davy probably liked it. I saw it in the theater too.
I didn't mind it, but I didn't. It's not. I remember thinking it was alright, but not remembering much else. So whatever.
Davy Joe.
It was a movie that was going to launch.
Put it this way: Terminator Genesis better than Florence Foster Jenkins.
Nice.
There's no way. There's no way. Ladies and gentlemen, do not pay attention to this man.
Way.
All right, on that terrible note, I'm going to move on. Guys, Florence Foster Jenkins is good. I highly recommend it. But maybe we'll talk more about it in the Sound Off, which is coming up next in about 14 minutes, which gives us plenty of time. How do you like that? So a Sound Off freeform segment. I'm going to have my top 5 Kevin Spacey films. Will Usual Suspects make the cut? Who knows? And what else is going to happen? Davey has a diatribe, and he's also going to dig in, whatever that means. Find out, freeform. We're going to talk about whatever we want. It's just going to happen. It'll flow, sort of, but with structure. All right, that's us. No Name Suicide Part 3 of the night is over. Heading to freeform right now.